welcome to Armita Golkar and to Alex Honnold. We are going to talk about fear. And from different perspectives, I would say that you are both explorers. You, Armita, explores human emotional learning as a research in psychology. And you, Alex, explores physical and mental capacity when you climb. Armita, what is the best thing with being a researcher within psychology?
Well, I would say first, on a general reason, perhaps, is it's an opportunity to kind of direct that curiosity that we talked about all day into something that I can see the product of. And curiosity, I mean, it's a basic, almost drive that we humans have, and research enables us to direct it and also be creative in looking at the products that we create. But at the same time, I think the fact that I can say that my job is to be uncertain is also quite nice, because it's okay to express uncertainty about things as a researcher, although I agree that mostly people view us as experts with all the answers, but I would say my job is to reduce uncertainty. That's exactly what I do, and I love it. And the fact that it's psychology is just the more specific way of saying that my curiosity deals with understanding human behavior, and that's where it started.
More questions than answers.
Always more questions than answers. Yeah. That's part of the game.
Yeah. Alex, what is it that you like with climbing?
I mean, so I think my love of climbing stems more from the physical act, the sensation of it, the feeling of moving upward. I think, actually, out of my curiosity, does anybody here climb? I meant, oh my, yeah, okay. Well, so everybody here already knows what's so great about climbing. I mean, I think that the feeling of it, basically the movement, the flow, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I mean, that looks fun.
Yeah.
Nice images.
Yeah, looks fun.
Yeah. But then I think beyond that, there's also I mean, honestly, the curiosity about the unknown, the pushing your own limits, the discovering what you're capable of, or maybe one of the most satisfying things in climbing for me is the feeling of improvement, you know, taking something that seemed impossible before and then working hard toward it and eventually being able to do it. I think that slow, gradual improvement is one of the most satisfying aspects of climbing to me.
And it looks amazing. Even so, it is dangerous. How do you look upon danger connected to what you do?
Well, so when you say it's dangerous, I would say that it has consequence. You know, there are, some climbing is more dangerous than other types. Some, basically there's this whole array of risk and danger and consequence, and it depends on the exact circumstances of what's going on. I'm distracted by the photo because I'm like, that is actually the most dangerous, difficult. Everything about that is the most challenging part of that specific route. So in this particular case, that photo does encapture everything that you think that free soloing is. But what I'm doing in that photo is maybe the 4 hardest meters of the entire 900-meter wall, and so. Of the 900 meters, 200 meters of it is relatively easy, and that I wouldn't call dangerous. That I could do anytime recreationally. I could, it's a pleasure. But then, 4 meters of it is incredibly hard and, arguably dangerous. I don't know. But it's a spectrum. And I think that in normal life, everything we do has a spectrum of risk like that as well. Every time you get in a car, there is danger involved. That there is risk, there is uncertainty. I mean, every time you step out your front door, there is uncertainty. But,
yeah, and I totally agree. I think it's an important aspect of it to think about the fact that we make all these decisions on an everyday basis that are typically full of not just risk but uncertainty more than anything, and traffic and trusting other people. I mean, you don't have any control really sitting in a car what everyone else is going to do in that traffic situation. The reason why we don't think that is as extreme, even if it would be deadly outcome, because in your case it's such an extreme case of it's 100% deadly outcome if you fall. A traffic accident could be potentially deadly. There are other situations that are as dangerous in terms of the consequences being deadly, but we are used to them because they're so frequent. So we don't really pay attention to the risks and uncertainties in everyday life because they're frequent enough So we kind of adapt to the fact that it's normal and everyone else is doing it, which makes us kind of devalue the risks and uncertainties associated with traveling in a car or other choices. The biggest, perhaps most uncertain choice that we most grown-ups do is having a child. It's full of uncertainty in terms of the responsibility, what's going to happen, are they going to survive? It's a lot of emotional and very, very, I would say, concrete risks and uncertainty surrounding that single decision. Still, we do it, and it's very common, and it seems like a reasonable thing to do, and we don't think about the consequences of exactly what does this mean. And there, I think you need to think about it that way, that the frequent or common behaviors are things that we get used to and that we don't evaluate in the same way, while your actions are the extreme of being very rare and something no one else does, and therefore we pay more attention to the actual dangers involved, even if there are other differences, of course.
So that's why we are perhaps more scared of getting into an airplane than into a car, because the statistics would kind of prove the other way around.
Of course, yeah. And there I think the consequence of if a plane crashes, there's like kind of almost 100% chance or possibility that I would die, while
not 100, but
yeah,
very high.
Fair enough. Which we tend to overweight in terms of. But I think it's worth thinking about how many actions and decisions we take each day that are surrounded by uncertainty and risk, and that we don't make such a big thing about.
May I add something, just talking about risk and that kind of uncertainty? I think that, when you look at free soloing, you look at the rock climbing, it seems so crazy. But that is risk that's fully chosen and appreciated and then mitigated as much as I can. And I think that the real danger in life is when you're taking risks without thinking about it, which when we talk about driving, we talk about so many other aspects of normal life. And so a comparison that I like to throw out is, when people go partying on the weekends, like they go drink on Friday night and then they drive home and they're like, oh, it's not that big a risk. I do it every weekend. It's fine. But you're sort of like, when you start taking uncalculated risks like that, that's when you're really just rolling the dice. And, even though rock climbing or free soloing might look much more extreme, those are risks that I've thought about for a very long time. I've prepared for, I've trained for, and then I've chosen them intentionally and executed them as well as I can. It's really different than just going out on a Saturday night, getting a little incapacitated, and then hoping for the best.
And I think that you have more control and I mean, in terms of like the mastering of what you do than we have in many other situations in life when I try things that I have not overtrained or know almost by heart as you do after that amount of training, and that I don't know less about, but I still choose to do. So it's quite different.
And that's interesting, because we have all these risks, and some of them we fear, some of them we kind of are attracted to. How would you describe fear as the phenomenon as it is? How do you describe it?
I think fear, there are two things that I think goes in there. The first thing is, in terms of definitions of what fear is both an adaptive survival response to a threat or to a predictor of danger or threat. That's the most basic and fundamental property that I would describe in terms of like what fear is. And that's something we need in order to survive and to basically avoid harm. And all animals do that. The other part of it is the subjective experiences, the conscious feelings we have when we say, I'm afraid. Usually we think that these two things go together, that we react fearfully, or that the fear response is something that always comes together with the feeling of also being afraid. But not particularly so. And these are two quite... I'm not saying they're not related, I'm just saying that one thing doesn't necessarily cause the other. And the sense of mastery and control and knowing what you're doing, or knowledge in general, can modify these feelings, of course, which in turn can modify these more fundamental properties of the fear response that's elicited in different ways. And it's important to keep in mind that they're not the same thing, and the easiest way to do that is perhaps to see that the adaptive survival response, those properties of fear, they are prevalent and present in all animals. They wouldn't survive if they couldn't predict the dangers that they meet. But I would still argue that not all animals are subjectively and consciously aware of those feelings that we humans also have, and that can be triggered by not just external threats, but internally generated thoughts that could scare me, but not necessarily evoke a response. So it's a complicated picture.
It's nice to hear you explain it that way, because I have no technical knowledge about fear except that I've spent a lot of time being very afraid. And so when I talk about fear, I always frame it in exactly the same way, where there's actual rational fear that makes sense because it's your body responding to danger, and then the perceived, just the felt fear. And I think that the challenge in a situation like rock climbing is being able to differentiate between the two and know which to heed and which to ignore. But I always talk about it in exactly those terms. It's really nice to hear an expert actually say it the right way. I'm like, turns out it's true.
We can agree.
Yeah, that's nice. I think that's good.
So could you say that we actually could find it less fearsome to take a risk than to live in uncertainty?
In many ways, yes. And if you break it down to some kind of definition of what risk is compared to uncertainty, I would say that usually we conceptualize risk as situations during which we know the outcomes and we also know the probabilities of the outcome, like playing the roulette or something. That's a risk. There are many more known features to risk than to uncertainty. Uncertainty would be a situation where I potentially know the outcome. It could be I die, but the probabilities are unknown. And that poses a greater challenge to us as humans. And I think I both agree and to some extent disagree with the previous talks we had about what uncertainty means to us in the way that I think we should embrace it. And the fact that, yes, in some situations we like uncertainty. We had examples of not wanting to know what you get for Christmas, or there are many, many examples. Because I think the fact that what's fostering this liking is curiosity, right? We are curious people or animals, and we sometimes prefer not knowing. But what really drives curiosity in itself is the fact that we don't like not knowing. It's aversive to humans to not know. And that kind of also then fosters the curiosity because it's a means to reduce the uncertainty. That's basically what we want to do. And you do reduce uncertainty all the time by practicing, by doing that repeatedly, so you know the routine, so you can take a 400-meter stretch down to 4 meters of really uncertain, while the rest is kind of something you can do by heart or while sleeping or whatever. There are examples. And I think if we just acknowledge the fact that uncertainty is something that we innately don't like, it's aversive to us, then we can also see the benefits of that motivation of wanting to find out, because it does yield curiosity and exploration and all those other things. And when we like uncertainty and choose it is usually when there is either not too much at stake or we are so much in control. But when we don't have the knowledge, we don't feel we have control, and there is a lot of things at stake, we typically don't like uncertainty.
Yeah.
Can you relate?
No, I 100% relate. I mean, there's certainly moments in climbing when it all goes bad, and that's exactly what you're describing. I mean, free soloing is at its best when you do have an element of control, when you've prepared or you're at least confident in your abilities. But basically, if it all starts to go sideways and you're not confident, you don't know what you're doing, it gets quite scary. I mean, that's exactly when you're having a bad experience and you don't want to be up there. And I've certainly had that occur many times. But that's what you're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for surprises in what you do?
Well, how do you prepare for the unknown?
For the unknown?
I don't know. I mean, so I think for me, it's about just having a wide range of preparations, just a wide range of experience, and then being able to build a broad comfort zone, basically, so that anything unforeseen will still hopefully fall within your comfort zone to some extent. I mean, I think that for me anyway, with climbing, I've consistently pushed myself in slightly different directions. I suppose, where you sort of, if you think of your comfort zone as a bubble, just slowly pushing it in little directions in each way, and then eventually it winds up with a pretty big bubble. And then all you can really do is hope that whatever your objective is will still fit within your bubble.
Yeah.
So preparation and knowledge is kind of the weapon or the tool we have against uncertainty and perhaps fear then in its extension.
Yeah, and I think within preparation would fall, visualization as sort of a subcategory of imagining things that are otherwise unpracticable. I mean, particularly in the case of free soloing something where you're going to do a big climb once and probably only once, so you can't exactly practice it in the conventional sense of the word because it's something that's only going to occur one time. But thankfully, as humans, we can imagine, we can project ourselves, and forward and backward in time. You can think through the movements. You can even imagine the sensations, like what it will feel like under your skin, and so you can kind of experience that climb many times while still only doing it once.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's also what you said when you said that, for example, having a child, how so many. The complexity of it when it comes to risks, but maybe that's because you can't imagine it, you can't visualize it in the same way as something very concrete, like climbing.
Yeah.
Well, don't you think? I mean, you could visualize pregnancy. I mean, you can lay there and you think.
I think it still helps, and the fact that it's something that's quite common, then you also use other people's experiences of, like, they had children. I sometimes have to relate to the fact that my mother survived having all the worries about what I did, so I'm probably going to survive with my anxieties and worries about what's going to happen to my children once I mean, with all the different stages of life that they're going to go through. And those are examples that I can use to kind of seek comfort, but I can also imagine and visualize how the future is going to be, which is kind of the gift of being human, that the fact that we can. And it also comes to this, like, wanting to reduce uncertainty is because we want to predict the future. That's kind of what the whole thing is about, trying to gather information to be able to predict what's going to happen. And as humans, we can project ourselves, as you say, both backwards but also forward in time, and imagine all the things that could happen in both a good and a bad way. I mean, it also fosters the ability to project into the future everything bad that could potentially happen, which often gives rise to worry and anxiety, like all the possible outcomes.
But it's still an important part of preparation.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, you have to think about the downsides if you're also going to think about the good sides.
So that's something that you can, it's still some kind of like information in that sense that you can also prepare then for those things that could happen, doesn't necessarily have to happen, but could. And within the normal range of human functioning, that's still, it's a type of practice, as you say, unless it becomes pathological, and all I can think of is the worst case scenarios for everything in life. But that's kind of the extreme, which is there in different forms of anxiety disorders, and so it's not that it doesn't happen, but within the normal range, it's a gift.
Yeah. But you must come across so much fear from others in what you do. How do you deal with that? Do you?
Well, to some extent, it doesn't really matter. I mean, well, I mean, it's true. I mean, people can be as scared as they want, but ultimately, it doesn't change the likelihood of me falling off. It doesn't change the consequences of me falling off. I mean, no matter how scared everybody else is, it doesn't change whether or not I can actually do the thing that I'm setting out to do. So to some extent, you just set it all aside. But obviously, when your friends are really scared for you, I value their opinions, and certainly my peers, other professional climbers, if some of the people whose opinions I really respect are horrified for me, then I'm like, oh, maybe I'll rethink it. But at a certain point, only I can know how prepared I am, how I feel for it, and other people's, opinions don't really matter at that point. But, as much as you want to say that you take your family into account and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's, it's true a little bit, but ultimately, nobody else has put that kind of time and preparation and energy into it, so, I mean, they don't really have an informed opinion on it. Which, so if I watch a video of big wave surfing, let's say, like, I don't like swimming, I don't like going in the ocean, I've never surfed. I see a video of somebody surfing, a 20-meter wave, and I'm like, that is completely insane. Yeah. That guy must have a death wish. That's so scary. That's crazy. And obviously that's the experience that most people have when they watch free soloing, and it's because not that many people have experience with climbing, except everybody in this room who turns out to be a climber. But most people don't have that much experience with free soloing, and so they look at it like, that's totally insane. Yeah. And I feel the same way about things that I don't know much about. But ultimately, you just have to trust that the person engaging in that behavior has properly prepared for it and is prepared for, Yeah.
We had climbers here in the audience. If you have a question, think about it, because we can spare some minutes and we can let you in. Yeah, Yeah, I think there is a microphone somewhere as well.
Or you just scream at us.
Scream.
The visualization, how about do you visualize the positive, and if you visualize as well, like the negative,
Yeah.
what would it be the negative?
Yeah, so I mean, we were sort of saying I definitely visualize the negative as much as the positive. I spent a lot of time, I mean, so some time visualizing the actual mechanics of what would happen if my foot slipped or something. You're like, you know, at the photo that was shown a minute ago, that was the boulder problem on the freerider. It's the hardest part. You know, I imagined a lot like, oh, if my left foot slipped, I'd probably pinwheel off the wall, I'd rotate to the left, I'd bounce off the ledge below, I'd maybe hit this other ledge that's 150 meters lower, but then either way I'm gonna die, and then you go to the ground. You know, so I mean, yeah, I definitely thought through every position on the wall, like, oh, if I slipped there, I would just slide all the way down this 100-meter slab, you know, things like that. I mean, it would all be a disaster. But it's important for me to think about those kinds of things ahead of time so that when I'm doing the actual climb, it doesn't occur to me for the first time, like, oh no, what if my foot slipped? You know, I've already thought, I know what'll happen when my foot slips. I'm gonna it's gonna be terrible and I'm gonna die, but I've already thought about it. You know, I think for me, the negative visualization is important to do ahead of time just so that in the actual moment, it doesn't come up for the first time. But, you know, I mean, the positive visualization is easy because you just think like, oh, I'm going to feel great. I'm holding onto these holes. The climbing is going to feel fluid and beautiful and fun. It's going to be this incredible experience. But I think, you know, it's important to balance that against the negative visualization with the, you know, what does happen if, or even not the actual visualization of falling to your death, but the imagining what it would feel like to get into a position and suddenly hesitate or, you know, worry that your foot's going to slip. You know, basically just to think through all those anxieties ahead of time so they're less likely to occur when it matters.
Another question? Okay, there is one.
The idea is run the mic up.
Oh, there's two.
No, this guy's going to do a stair workout. He's just going to run up and down as fast as he can. He's kind of not really hustling that hard, but.
Thank you. Okay, so this is fearful, by the way. And just like a lot of people here, I am both scientist and a climber, so this is a question for both of you guys. What do you think is the biggest enemy of fear?
The biggest enemy?
Yeah, like the biggest enemy to destroy it, or at least to push it down a bit.
I don't know, you mean the
like
biggest...
the enemy, what emotion?
Like how do you fight fear? Like what
Yeah, like name one emotion that you think is the opposite of like one of the best solution to fight fear.
So the question is how to combat fear then, right? Or
with the best emotion that you can have.
So I mean, I'll take a shot at this. I mean, so I actually don't really think that I combat fear with an emotion. I think that if anything, if I'm trying to work with fear, I mean, one sort of trick is to sort of reframe it as excitement. You know, you take sort of fear or nervousness or whatever, and you just sort of shift it a little bit in your head to, oh, I'm so excited for this thing that I'm about to do. I mean, I certainly think that that's the case with public speaking or a lot of other things like that, where you're standing backstage and you're like, oh, I'm a little bit afraid. And then you're like, no, I'm not afraid. I'm just excited. Because honestly, they feel almost the same within your body, and so it's pretty easy just to shift mentally. But other than that, though, I don't really think there is an emotional, or I don't think I personally have.
I agree, but I think it sounds simple and not that spectacular, but I think still the fact that what we combat are fearful experiences with is actually safe experiences. That's the only thing you can do instead of having another emotion to combat it. So if the part where practice comes in for you is actually a way to acquire a lot of safe experiences of a situation that otherwise seems very threatening or dangerous. And those safe experiences will teach you something. It's like you're accumulating knowledge about the fact that this is not dangerous. This is contradicting the intuitive sense of something being threatening. And that principle of acquiring safe experiences applies to all other things that we do. And the fact that we are surrounded by mostly safe experiences on an everyday basis also explains why we can do all these sometimes dangerous things, because we know that traveling in traffic is almost always safe. That's the experience I have, and that's the experience that almost everyone I know also have, which transmits to me conceptualize or thinking about traveling traffic as a safe thing. But really, if you just look at what you're doing, it seems very threatening, and you could also, or dangerous, you could explain it to someone else who never seen traffic in a big city, and they would be like, whoa, are you suicidal? Are you really going to go there? But you don't even know the bus driver or the other one or whoever.
You're trusting all the strangers, it's
all
crazy.
Those strangers that you trust and so on. And so I think the safe experiences is kind of the only way to combat this sense of this is potentially dangerous. It's also the principle that is used in clinical practice when we treat fear and anxiety and threat-related disorders is exposure, exposing the patient to basically safe experiences of what they otherwise fear or worry about. So it's kind of, it's a simple but very potent medicine, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. Do you have a last question?
I have a question over here.
Cool.
Sorry. I'm wondering about your state of mind while climbing. Do you enter flow, or are you constantly like analyzing every move, or are you able to? I don't know. I'm sure you heard of the state flow. So
yeah, definitely the ideal is to enter a state of flow. I mean, I don't really like the word flow, and but I mean, I have read the books, and I suppose that is technically what's occurring. But I sort of prefer to think of it as sort of automated or autopilot, whatever you want to call it, but just performing or executing the climb without thinking much about it. And I mean, I think that's kind of what I've been touching on with all the visualization and the practice is in order to make sure that I've done everything I need so that I don't have to think about anything on the actual climb. So that when I'm climbing, I can just do the climb and think of nothing else. That's the ideal anyway. Of course, there are moments where you're like, wait, which hand, or depending on the route, but.
The title of this discussion is called To Fear or Not to Fear, Shakespeare inspired. So we do have a choice in many situations.
I would say yes, definitely. We're not born with fears in that sense. We're born, we have an innate system to detect and respond to potential threats, and mostly predictors of threats. But not that hardwired as most other animals are in terms of knowing what to fear or what situations are potentially dangerous. We learn.
Is that true?
It is. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying it on stage.
Well, so we're less hardwired to experience fear than other animals?
I mean, we're less hardwired to fear specific objects or situations that would be innate. Like if you compare a cat and rodents, for instance. Rodents fear cats instinctively. They don't have to learn in the same way that cats are potentially dangerous or predators. What they lose with that kind of very fast responding fear system or threat system is flexibility, which we have as humans. So we don't have that kind of hardwired. We're of course wired to detect and respond to the predictors of threat, but we have to learn what those are, and that allows a lot of flexibility in terms of adaptation to environments that could change. Perhaps cats are no longer a predator or whatever. In the human mind, this flexibility is basically the key to how we can adapt to so many different environments with so many challenges in it. So yes, we have a choice, we can choose, but we need experience, and we need safe experiences, and we need, of course, mistakes where we learn that some things are truly dangerous. It can't be a lethal experience, of course, because then we're out of chances. But mostly we try out, by trial and error, and obviously by learning from others, and the accumulated knowledge from generations passed on to us are formed from experience. So that's basically what we do. We adapt to the world by learning about it, and for that to happen, we need to make mistakes, and we need to take then risks and also enter uncertainty all the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't find out something new, a new experience that could inform us in a new way.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Thank you so much. A warm hand to Armita and to Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.